getting used to this. And so yeah, see, she's going to hop back to her. There we go. Karen has started the
Okay.
recording.
Great, the recording started, so we can start the meeting. And I would just like to say to folks, because I can't see everybody on the screen, if you would use your hand up tool, which is up on the top of my screen, to indicate that you wish to speak, or trustees when we vote as well, because I'm not sure I can see everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning. Barry's got his hand up already. He's trying it out. Barry?
I'm just testing.
Okay, great. And this is the Finance and Operations Committee of the whole meeting for Monday, the 18th of September. Our mandate is to discuss and make recommendations to the board on financial, facilities, maintenance, technology, and transportation matters with a view to environmental sustainability. The agenda has been out for a while, and at this time, I personally and we would like to give thanks and acknowledge that the lands that we work, learn, and play on are the shared traditional territory of the Qualicum and Snanawas First Nations people, and we thank them. We don't have any presentations this morning, although I did want to just speak to a presentation that Mr. Monroe made and thank him very much for his PowerPoint update on what had happened at all the schools. And I'm hoping that that's on the website. I meant to check it and I haven't yet. But aside from the rat, it's pretty, well, even the rat is spectacular. So there you go. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Monroe. Project updates. The Oceanside Community Track. Phil, do you want to start?
Yep, sure. Good morning, everybody. Not a lot to update on this, but each month that we have this meeting, I'll certainly provide an update as we progress towards next spring and summer when we will be turning soil. People were off during the summer, i.e. the contractor for our engineering contractor, Coors Engineering, they were off throughout the summer, and we were to pick up discussions again here in September. We're mid-September, and it is on our radar to link in with them over the next couple of weeks and firm up the timeline and the procurement and those sorts of things, getting ready for an April-May turning of the soil. One of the biggest first steps was to get the DRC moved throughout the summer. So that happened over the summer period, and the existing portables are sitting there for us to do something with now. You know, just for people's awareness, this was the first phase of the project to get the DRC moved, because the track's moving into a little bit of the space where the existing DRC was. There's a power distribution for electrical there that's butted up against the existing DRC. So we have to do some electrical rerouting, which is not an easy thing. We have to work with BC Hydro to get some electrical moved. So that's where it's at in that phase of it. And like I said, probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, by the time we have our next FinOps meeting, we'll have a lot more to update on timelines, progress, and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Phil. I am going to throw out a faint hope, and I'm doing this as an individual trustee, not on behalf of the board, nor as the chair of the Finance and Operations Committee. And I hope that I don't do it over and over again. Is there any faint hope of an elementary track meet this year on a new track?
What date is the elementary? When's this year?
It's usually mid-June.
So no.
Ish.
Yeah, definitely not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
And over to Eve.
Just housekeeping things. Phil, maybe you could introduce Mike. We haven't met Mike before. Most
Oh,
of
I'm
us,
sorry.
And welcome, Mike, to the. You kind of know us, but maybe
yeah. For those that don't, thanks, Eve. For those that don't know Mike, Mike started in the role. We did some restructuring here back at the start of the year, and Mike is manager of operations and facilities. Started in that role in early February of this calendar year. So yeah, welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Is there anybody? Is there anybody
yeah,
else? Because I can't see everybody. So is there anybody else that's new to our happy little group?
Nope.
Okay,
can't
great.
see anyone.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, the BC Hydro Energy Work. I guess it's an update, and over to you again, Phil.
Yep, no problem. I can see I got a few speaking points early in the piece, and then you won't hear from me for a few updates. But where this is at is we've got 100% funding from BC Hydro. This is a program. So we've got the energy manager, but there was some funding from BC Hydro to get strategic energy management plans together. And so what that entails is they've given us a list of engineers that we can use to do that for each of the disciplines. So we've got an electrical engineer doing electrical assessment for the energy plan. We've got a HVAC or mechanical engineer doing it for their side of the portfolio. We're also getting and this so those two are 100% funded, and we've got 2 engineers working on that. Once that information comes, we pull it together, and Josh, our energy manager, is going to help pull it together to create the overall energy management plan. Additionally, I met with Josh last week. What we'd like to get done is also, and this is 80% funded, is get an assessment done of our maintenance facilities to see what energy, what capacity have we got if we were to start electrifying some of the white fleet. And if we were to do that, like what's the draw on the grid? What capacity do we have? What infrastructure do we need from BC Hydro to move down that? Because just putting in all these juice bars. So that is going to form part of the overall strategic energy management plan. Where it's at right now is each of those disciplines are off doing their thing. And then Josh and I are going to pull that together. I mean, in chatting to Josh, this is a 6-month project to get this together, to pull it all together. So that's where it's at. Each of the disciplines are doing their thing, and we want to have fleet incorporated into it as well.
Okay, great. Are there any questions or comments? This is an item for discussion, so
Mine is very exciting. That's awesome.
great. Trustee Kurland.
Thanks, Elaine. So you just mentioned really quickly the fleet. So are you talking about electrifying the fleet? Was that what I understood there?
We're looking at options to do it, and so excuse me, the rebates that are out there, as an example, the vans that the trades use and NIT use, for example, 67,000 brand new. We can get it from the ministry for about 43. That's a diesel. Then electric is 67, and there's $20,000 worth of rebates, so it comes down and it's cost neutral for electric to diesel. Obviously, we don't want to go in and get all of our fleet straight away as electric, but we want to look at what capacity we have to do some of the white fleet and start entering into that space. So we're just getting assessment done as part of the energy management plan.
So we got up at the maintenance. Is there electrical chargers already?
No,
Or-
no. That's why we need
For
to
the
get the
bus.
assessment done. There's
For
only
the
only the
bus.
one for the bus. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
no
Thanks,
problem.
Phil.
If I could add just quickly,
Yes.
Elaine, the reason why this energy management plan is so important, and I know we'll get into it later on about the minor capital submissions, is once we have the energy management plan and it tells us where the greatest value in capital dollars being spent, we can have the capital plan look out 5, 6, 7 years,
Yes.
because everything will come from this energy management plan and for fleet.
Yeah. And any kind of planning, my philosophy is any kind of long range planning we can do is a good thing. So thank you for that. I just realized that if we have time under information items, I would like to add an item, the decarbonization report. Trustee Austin attended a seminar, webinar, and just to kind of update on that. So if we have time, we will do that. And I think we will.
It is on the agenda for the regular board meeting, an update from yourself and Julie at the
Okay.
regular board as well. Not to say, not
Okay.
do both. Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. False Bay project and other operations updates again. Phil,
Yeah, I'll talk about False Bay and then just a couple other operational updates. So False Bay, we are obviously supported from the ministry to progress to putting the business case, or the PDR, the project definition report, together. Interestingly, we did a site visit there. So we have an architect who's leading the team of engineers, and the architect then gets an electrical engineer, a structural engineer, a mechanical engineer, and that's the team that are going to help put this report together. Also, on that team is the gentleman we pulled out of retirement who used to work for the ministry and used to approve these business cases as to whether it was a rebuild or an upgrade. And he's part of our project definition report. He's putting it together for us. So we all went over there, as did Mike Suchak, and we went over to False Bay. And the comment I heard from them repeatedly was, "I haven't seen that before. I haven't seen that before. I haven't seen that before." And so, and even to the point where he looked at the gym and he said, "Is that supposed to be a gym?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, yeah." So he made a good suggestion, and he said, have you thought about bringing the ministry over for a site visit? And so because he said when he was in the ministry approving these things, there was some that he was just going to do as an upgrade, not as a rebuild. And once he walked the site, it spoke for itself. So I took what he said on board, and we have the ministry coming up from Victoria tomorrow, and we're doing a site visit to
Wow.
False Bay. We're going over there and we're going to show them all the things, and then hopefully that becomes, and he said to me, he goes, once the ministry sees it, it should speak for itself as to why it qualifies for a rebuild. So very excited about that. Not going to waste the opportunity of them being up here either. So we're going to take them over in the morning to False Bay, come back in the afternoon, tour Bolinas and tour Craig Street. And if we can get Errington in there as well, we will. But we're going to spend the afternoon walking those two sites and just show some of the challenges that we have in Bolinas, for example. But Bolinas and KSS, Bolinas just makes the most sense because it's close by. So show them how we don't have a proper cafeteria for the kids and things like that. And then hopefully that helps leverage some of the FIP funding and some of the other funding avenues that I can start to poke away at with them. So that's exciting. That's happening tomorrow. From a timeline perspective, we anticipate that the PDR, the project definition report, will be in and submitted by the end of the calendar year, and then looking for approval from the ministry in March and April next year to then hopefully, because it will either be an upgrade, seismic upgrade, or a rebuild. In March or April next year, we'll get approval to proceed with one or the other. Hopefully it's a rebuild, and then next year will be spent designing, and then 2025 will be the project. So that's where that is moving along. So that's the False Bay one. We've got the submissions that have gone in for major capital. Bolinas is submitted for a seismic roof upgrade. We'll know in March whether we can proceed, and then next year we'll be planning for that, for hopefully action starting in 2025 as well. So a couple of busy years on that front. From a school startup perspective and operational update, that's always, a big thing at the start of the year is transportation. I've mentioned this at the most recent board meeting, but we changed things a little bit with the busing applications, and there's a lot of focus going into just some of the structure in transportation and how we do things. And we're going to be doing getting the Traverser route software upgrade, which is going to have iPads in all the buses, and it's going to have turn-by-turn instructions, and then the bus drivers can actually sit down at a computer here at the ops department and drive their route virtually on the computer to do some training, as much as doing training in the bus as well. So there's a lot of good things happening there. But interestingly, we moved the applications forward by 3 months, and I mentioned this at the board meeting. By August 1st this year, we had processed 85 to 90% of bus applications, whereas at August 1st last year, we were just starting to process bus applications. So we had pretty much done the majority of the applications before we'd even started them last year. And interestingly, we're up to, I think it's about 2,120 applicants with courtesy and eligible riders. And we're going to get a really good, we're really enforcing the children to swipe on the bus this year. And as we get this routing software, it's going to enhance it. But we're going to get a really good data set as to what our busing makeup is. Last year, we weren't really enforcing the swipe as much, and we didn't know how many kids were actually on there. Sometimes it wasn't a good data set to be able to make decisions on whether our buses were at capacity or not. Really excited about where we're at, and in the next couple of weeks we'll have some good information to make decisions on what we require for busing and all that sort of thing. So appreciate all the parents out there that have worked through this with us in the last month or two, but we've really stripped it back to try and build it back up rather than just take everything that we had and keep building on it. And that's it.
Great. Trustee Curlin, you did have your hand up and you've taken it down. Are you okay over there?
No, I wanted to ask Phil a question.
Okay.
So are you guys taking a water taxi over there tomorrow?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, okay. I think the ferry's out of service too.
It's out of service, and it's grossly inefficient because it runs once in the morning and then once again at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and
Yeah.
that's a lost opportunity with the ministry if we're just stuck on the island the whole day.
Yeah, no, I get that. It
Yeah,
doesn't run
so
on Tuesday anyway.
yeah. So Phil, I have a question. I know that there were some hiccups with the bus routes and some of the bus routes not getting to the schools in time for first classes and stuff. Has all of that been worked out?
Yeah, I think we're going through some, always at the start of September, it's a little bit bumpy. And then as per the collective, the bus riders then change routes. They bid into their routes based on seniority towards the end of the month here. But to my understanding, everything has been worked out on that front.
Okay. And just an information piece. Hopefully the ferry to Liskiti will be running again. I'm planning to go over as the trustee liaison to that school on the 29th of September with the principal, Braden Gordon. And I know that other trustees have been interested. The downside, as Trustee Kurlan said, is once you get there, you're stuck for the whole day. So it's quite a commitment. But if anybody's interested in going over with us, please just let me know.
Well, if whenever you are planning, we do have someone that we use frequently or semi-frequently for getting it back and forth. Depending if the trades are going over, for example, and they've got a full day's worth of work, they'll go over on the ferry. But if we need to get over there and back, we use this water taxi. So an option is if you go over on the ferry and then you could take this lady to get it one way back. But anyway, if you need her contact details, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank
there
you
is
very
a ferry
much.
at 1 o'clock, Elaine, isn't there? Still?
Not from the island side, I don't think. I think that's summer schedule.
No,
I could be
think
wrong.
there
I got
is-
stuck over there for a whole day the last time I went over.
Oh yeah, well, there's always been a 1 o'clock ferry, three
Yeah.
times a day. But so if somebody got over there at, get to the school at 10 o'clock, they could possibly get back over on the 1 o'clock. Anyway,
I'm
Anyway,
reluctant
thank
to
you.
use the word stuck anyway. I think when you're on Liskiti, it's just a fabulous opportunity
Yeah.
while you're there.
Yes, and of course
Lots
you know me, I like to walk, so I'm getting around. All right. Are we good then to move forward? All right, we're moving forward. Information items. Enrollment update. And that's Ron and we have first names here. I'm trying to be very formal and use last names. But Ron and Jillian.
Right, so I'll start, and Jill can, won't say chime in, Jill can obviously add context and color as I kind of present. I'm gonna show you a summary of where we're at. So the good news is our numbers are up in headcount. And so recognizing that this is only mid-September, that we still do a fulsome count at the end of September for the September 30th. And of course, we don't know FTE yet. We're just sort of looking at headcount, but I'll show you where we're at. And then maybe Jill can provide some color in terms of what we're doing with some of the pressures. So hopefully you can see this. So overall, if you go to the bottom, the gray is our
Can you make it bigger at all?
bigger.
Okay.
bigger.
Hang on.
Thanks, Ron.
Well, I didn't
perhaps-
change. I haven't changed
perhaps-
anything yet.
I
Relax,
just want to
relax.
say-
I know you're trying.
Perhaps people have forgotten, but on Microsoft here, we have our own option to make it bigger or smaller for our own needs. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's the plus or minus sign.
Right.
So we
And then
don't.
There's also moving your chair forward too. Ha.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kidding.
lean in.
Okay. Okay. So hopefully
That's
you can
funny.
see where we're at. Is that big enough?
It's
I'm trying
big
to
enough for
eliminate as
me.
much as I can. Okay. So the gray column is our net change from projection and net change from September a year ago. So again, so this is year over year change. This is year over projection change, as it were. So when we put our numbers in, obviously our funding is goes in March. Sorry, our projections go in March. That rolls into our funding for the 23-24 kind of thing. So it's this value here, the 61, that will give us net gain in funding. The year over year is just interesting information kind of thing. So 2 years ago in the elementary, we only grew year over year by 18. This year we've grown in the elementary range about 67. And again, so I just sort of putting some context in terms of as we think about projecting out over multiple years, which is coming into the flavor of D on this on the agenda, and looking at what that means over the course of time for the district, it's important that we understand the trend, obviously. And so coming out of COVID, there has been no trend, is really what the message is. We lost a number of kids as every to DL, as every district in the province. And we've had about 2 years of kind of incomplete data to try to predict our projections going forward, sort of thing. So we are coming out of that weird anomaly of we dipped and now we're coming back out. And so that's kind of what factored into our conservative approach for our projections. And so if you recall, we projected 30 kids, 30 FTE down in our numbers. And so this is kind of a good news story at this juncture that basically says we are seeing the numbers in the district, not to the extent of other districts like the Souks, the Surreys, et cetera, but there is growth in the elementary side. In the secondary side, again, last year, and this was all part of the rebound. So last year, year over year, we saw 67 kids come into the district at the secondary level. This year, we're only seeing about 23. And again, part of it is the differential between our alternate program and picking up kids in the secondary program. And so you can see our alternate program declined last year by 24 kids. This year there's a decline again in the alt program of 19, but again it's being picked up in the bricks and mortar or the other schools, Bolinas and Qualicum. All of this to say, so far so good. Mid-month, the information is showing that we've got some extra kids. And again, to highlight some of ones that sort of Jill might be able to speak to is net decline in Arrowview, net increase at Arrington, net increase at Nanoose over projections. Qualicum is an interesting story in terms of kind of wondering why the numbers are higher than last year. And it's now consistent. So 2 years ago, they increased over our projection. So each year they're kind of going beyond what we thought they would be. And we started or at least I started thinking about it in terms of affordable housing is in the Qualicum North area. Qualicum is also a large cross-boundary district school site. So we get a lot of kids cross-boundary from Bowser. We get a lot and from the little Qualicum area kind of thing, which is in the Bowser area. And likewise, the North Arrington kids that we've now put them into the Qualicum Beach catchment, they've always fed into the school anyways. And there is room, as Jill might be able to speak to. But again, I'm just going to highlight those items, and if she wants to add any color to it, be up by all means.
Okay, I've got on our speakers list, I've got Eve. I don't know if you want to go now, Eve, or after Jillian has spoken.
Well, maybe Jill will flesh it out, but I'm just kind of the kick on for Qualicum's interesting, and the Nanoose one is interesting, and maybe if any insight would be interesting. Yeah.
Okay, and Barry, did you want to go now or later?
I'll wait till Jill has spoken. Thank you. Thanks, Elaine.
Okay.
Good morning.
Over to you.
Good morning. Yeah, it's exciting news. We are above our projections, which is great. Just to speak to a couple of the sites that Ron spoke about, Qualicum Beach Elementary School, we have somewhat control over. We've permitted quite a few cross-boundary applications to come into that site through the cross-boundary process, and they are coming from predominantly the Bowser area. That's that Corcan Meadowwood area, where families of work are predominantly have most of their life in Qualicum and not going further north to Bowser. So we've accepted a lot of cross boundaries, and that's what's caused some increase there. In saying that, we also put in an extra staffing into that site to accommodate for the increase in what we were seeing in the trend that we noticed. So that staffing went in late June, and we've been able to address it through that. It is a site that I did speak to actually the principal this morning, and they are tight in many of their classes as we start to work our way through the last part of the cross-boundary requests that we have there. So they are tight. As far as Springwood, we've been able to manage Springwood with the cross-boundary changes that we did last year, and you can see that they're coming in on about projections. Nanoose, it's the only site that I actually never feel confident about when we start looking at our projections. Every year we're either up or we're either down, and there's no rhyme or reason around what that looks like. Our best guess, other than the previous principal saying that they used to walk up and down the highway with a "we've got room" sign, is that we have families that move into the catchment area and it's multi-family or generational families that live together. So we're seeing a little bit of that. We've also had some families returning from either Aspen Grove or the Nanaimo Christian School that are children that live in the Nanoose area. So we've had a few families that have returned to our system. So that's addressing some of the concerns there, or the increases that we're seeing at Nanoose. Oceanside, I think I shared with the board that we anticipated that we would need to put in an extra staffing into their English program at some point, and we actually have done that based on their enrollment projections. So we put in that staffing that went in at the start of school. So we've addressed some of the increases that you heard Secretary Treasurer Amos talk about through those two extra staffings that we put in, one at the end of June and certainly one that we put in September. And still things change each day as we get to our 1701 count, which is September 29th.
Qualicum? Any?
Qualicum Secondary or Qualicum Elementary?
Yeah, so elementary. I mean, high school. Sorry. I mean, it looks up. Is it really up? Or, just.
So if you recall, part of what we were doing is moving the Tides Senior and the Tides Junior program into the Qualicum site. So some of the increases that you see at Qualicum Secondary are based on the Tides program now being part of that KSS school. There's a small increase, but most of it is taken in through the Tides program, and you'll see our decrease in our online learning as we put all of the programs together. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Thanks. I had a question about Bowser and whether we need to look at changing. I guess my question is, thinking long term again, do we need to change our boundaries there? And then I have a second question.
That would be absolutely worth a conversation with our community. That's predominantly where we get students from, is the Meadowwood area. Families working in Qualicum and coming this way, daycare. We do have a daycare program up at Bowser Elementary School that started, actually the first day is today. That may make a difference for some families, but predominantly it is coming from that Corcan area, that the cross-boundary into Qualicum Elementary, so yes.
So something we need to keep our little minds on. And the other thing, again,
Well,
in terms of.
If I can interject. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to interject in terms of mindful that you don't want to change boundaries if the kids are leaving.
The wrong
Right?
way.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you generally will only change, you will only consider the boundary change unless you hard unless you harden the boundary, I guess is really what it comes down to. But again, long-term
Mhm.
plan, certainly the long-range facility plan will get into that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
you kind of got to think about what are you trying to, what's the question you're trying to answer, I guess.
Mhm, mhm. Thanks, Ron. The other question, and this is just a wonder more than anything else, is I know that Jillian, you've had some conversations with the wonderful world of books people. I know this from my retired teacher side, and OBLT, of course, you're part of. I'm wondering if long term you're seeing any increase in our projections, like, down the road, the 3-year-old kind of level.
I don't know. There's lots of babies out there. That's where we use Barriger, and Barriger has been pretty good for us in terms of helping look at that cohort retention and then the births in our community. So it feels like there's lots of babies, but I can't answer that question without any confidence at all at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sort of feeling the same way. Trustee Kurland and then Trustee Austin. Oh, sorry,
Mm.
Trustee Austin first, and then I can't read. And then Trustee Kurland.
Okay, thanks. I'm just wondering, I imagine we'll see these figures again sometime after September 30th when you do a final count. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible if we see them again, could we have a column that shows the capacity of each school so that we can see the enrollment right up against the capacity, both nominal and operational? And I'm wondering if it's also possible to maybe have another little breakout row and or column that breaks out some of the programs, like for Oceanside, perhaps. This is the English enrollment, this is the French enrollment, same for Bolinas, wherever, where Tides is residing, things like that. Could we just break it out a little bit so we're getting a sense of the different programs residing in the different sites?
That sounds like a question to maybe Ron and Jillian.
Ron does have some of that information already in his spreadsheet. I think we're trying to give a high level look, see for today's conversation, and then absolutely we can. Ron already has most of that material in his hidden columns.
Perfect.
So,
well, if we
yeah.
can see it for the final count, maybe after September 30th in
So
October.
so quickly noting the capacity is now showing. But again, to your point, I'll put the capacities in there for future summaries. Obviously, the programs are already listed: regular and French immersion and alternate and DL and continuing ed. The tides we can just kind of note in terms of where they show up in maybe a comment column. But yes, we'll give you some
And then-
more as these numbers obviously get finalized, kind of thing. We can kind of share more detailed information of what's behind the numbers.
If I
And
can
there's-
just jump in for a
sorry.
second. One of the things that, if you recall, the TIDES program, not the TIDES program, I'm thinking of the STREAM program up at Qualicum Elementary. There's actually 2 classrooms this year, and the other classroom came out of the regular staffing that was in Qualicum Elementary because we had such a wait list, and a lot of the students were from Qualicum Elementary. So our schools are doing things like that too. The TIDES program will be part of KSS, and if they weren't in the TIDES classroom learning in that integrated environment, they will be part of the Qualicum Secondary. So some of it is hard to delineate, and others it works really well to be able to say this is what program is at which facility.
So in summary, we'll delve deeper into it the next time around. And also just to Trustee Austin's point, there's what the ministry thinks we can hold and what we think we can hold. So those 2 numbers are often different. Over to Trustee Kurland, and then I've got Trustee Kellogg.
Thanks. So this might not be the appropriate time to bring it up, but we've got enrollment and then we've got attendance, and with from COVID times till now, and COVID is coming back, that we might have had our enrollment or attendance down 10% or so, And I'm wondering if there's, if that's manifesting itself, maybe through the chair to, Superintendent Dr. Jory could comment on that.
Great. Dr. Jory, do you have a comment on that?
I'm sorry, I was listening and but I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me.
How's
Well,
attendance?
I'm just saying, is it,
Oh.
is it really impacting our, what's happening that, because I just said that enrollment and attendance are two different things. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
especially, if we're down 10% every day, I'm just wondering, this might not be the appropriate time to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm not asking for daily attendance reports right now.
Yeah,
I did that for the last 2 years, and it is a lot of work for our staff member to put those together. And what I suggested is that we're going to go without it for a while, and I'll just take anecdotal comments from the principals. And if it looks like we're into another situation where there's a surge of illness, we'll start to track it a little bit more carefully. We are looking at staff attendance. There's staff attendance does mirror student attendance to a certain degree. When you see stuff going around, it hits the kids and then it hits the adults. And we have had some absenteeism already, but we're not at the levels anywhere close to the levels we were during, peak illness
Okay.
times.
yeah.
There is talk about this. I've heard the same things you've heard. And you'll all be delighted to know that I got trolled on social media this weekend for not taking a firmer stance in my podcast. I'm not sure the person actually listened to the whole thing where I said we can pivot and do whatever we need to do. We'll be ready, but we are excited about the fact we're carrying going forward without having to have restrictions in place right now. So.
And I'll take this opportunity to thank Dr. Jory for his podcast, which I read in the paper. I know there was a longer one that you could get to, but I figure I got the highlights. So thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
Jory.
he spends a lot of time editing it out. It probably sounded better than it was in reality, but thank you.
And Trustee Kellogg.
I just had a question for Jillian. So Jillian, is the TIDES program, is that a district program or is that school-based? Or are there students that come to the TIDES program from other schools or areas?
Good question. It's in transition. The TIDES program was a blended learning environment through our online learning. And as we moved to be in compliant with the new regulations for online, it was outside of the online learning requirements. So we've moved it over to a regular school. As with any student attending our secondary schools, we do have students that cross enroll through online, but they also do cross-boundary, and some go to KSS and some go to Bolinas. Bolinas has a football program, for example, and we have some students living in Qualicum that like to be part of that. So we do honor that. So it's in progress in terms of the transition, going from the online world to being part of the KSS program.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to move on, and the next few items are mostly Ron and Ryan. And so let's just turn it over to Ron.
Thank you. So the financial summary, this is the year-end snapshot, effectively. We've got the financial statements with the auditors, and they'll be presenting them to the board. We're picking them up this week. They'll go into the in-camera agenda for the board, and then when the board sees them, they'll go into the regular board meeting package. But again, because they're in draft form, because the board hasn't seen them, what I do is I do a sort of a review of where the financials ended up, recognizing that they're not financial statements, they are still the financial summaries, but they are sort of a snapshot of where we're going and some of the observations that we can make. So just looking at those two sheets that are included in the agenda. So again, I preface it all the time with, what are you looking at? So you're looking at 2 years worth of data. You're looking at the amended budget data of 21-22, and it gets compared against the actual of 21-22. And then you're looking at the amended budget of 22-23, and it's getting compared to the actual of 22-23. I provide the differential of dollar value. I provide the differential in a percentage, and then I just make some comments in here of things that might be of interest of why some numbers are higher or lower than expected. So that's broad strokes what you're looking at. And again, looking at it from the perspective of revenues, and then looking at the expenditures in the operating side, two versions, one by what we call object, which is on the first page, and then one by program, which is on the second page. And it's the same data, but it being presented in a different categorization. So revenues were about 262,000 more than projected in, or more than anticipated in our provincial grants. That was a positive thing. Mostly it was attributed to our second and third count numbers being slightly over my pessimistic observation that I had going into the year. So they came, like I said, this is when we were cautiously optimistic. This was one of those natures of being optimistic, and it came back that we actually saw some additional revenues that supported some of the services we were providing. Likewise, in the other revenue items, again, pluses and minuses in terms of where the revenues are showing up. Certainly, investment revenue was up slightly because we made a modification mid-year with the amended budget. Likewise, additional tenants contributed to our revenue for rentals, and likewise, our miscellaneous grants had contributions from childcare as well as additional grants that came to us that show up on this line. And then international programming had a slight increase in revenues. All good, but $641,000 worth of operating revenue received, additional to amended budget. How we spent those monies effectively, staffing and benefits, we tend to have a fairly good idea in terms of how we spend and how we allocate those funds. And so you're seeing a plus or minus of 75,000. That's all good. Likewise, in most of the supplies and services, we tend to get it right. Once in a while, when there's small budgets in there, and if we happen to spend differently to these small budgets, they look weird, I guess is really all I'm saying. And so case in point is the rental and lease column. In the past, we haven't put a lot of money against that because we haven't spent a lot in that. But over the course of the last couple of years, O&M sort of has been dipping into this object code to rent things like scissor lifts, fencing around playgrounds and that kind of stuff. So those things get charged to this, and so really it just means that it looks really weird when you spend 29 or 30,000 against a 5,000 budget. But what it'll be is when we do the amended budget process, we will put money into these things so they don't look weird, and so that we basically are recognizing the increased expenditures in these certain areas. The only other observation on this page is the supplies and services, or the supplies line item. And this is the observation I made sort of going into this year, that after addressing the utility increases and addressing the replacement cost issues, this is our next area that we need to feed, I guess, as it were. So we don't certainly when it comes to our budgets and what we do in some of these areas, we rather than impacting the classroom and impacting staffing, we go to some of the the supply budgets themselves, and it doesn't necessarily always drive change, because let's face it, we have some of these things that are needed, are necessary, our supply budgets, and sometimes it's just not possible to bring those numbers down. So what you're seeing is cost escalations, continued appropriation spends that are coming out of these things. And again, these are reserves that we've got set aside out of our operating reserves, are being spent within this line item, which is sort of what's the word I want? It's not matching necessarily the amount of money that we put in for the budget portion itself. So again, this will be our next get to. on the amended budget round, if we do have some additional revenues, that we can support the schools better in terms of their school budgets, and also address some of the supply budgets that are being driven by other departments, and we can kind of add value to those to reinforce again the monitoring process here. All that saying, at the end of the day, we've actually seen about a $260,000 contribution to surplus. So if you recall, looking at the second column in, last year we finished the year, we planned to spend an $800,000 use of surplus. We ended up tapping into it an additional 300 and finished last year at 1.1 million in use of surplus. And so we basically turned all that around to effectively be able to say we balanced our budget, and then we're able to make a small contribution to our operating surplus to pad our contingency going forward. And again, so it's a positive turnaround. We just have to keep monitoring it, making sure that our line items are that our budgets are allocated appropriately, and that we're actually continuing to service those areas that need to be serviced. Not much to say on the next page. Some of these things are on the program side. Some of it is because a lot of the additional funding that we're seeing in the district is coming to us in special purpose grants. It's staffing within the operating grant that is sort of we're allowed to move some of those staffing into the special purpose areas, and sometimes we just don't get it right in terms of how our budget is allocated across multiple programs. And so you're seeing some ebbs and flows this year in terms of what we need to do when we do our amended budget to put the money in the right place, to allocate it appropriately across the different programs. Again, at the end of the day, function one, which is the instruction one, basically $37,000 overspent. That's all okay. But again, it's just a matter of getting the allocations right when we do the budget. Likewise, in the district administration, the three elements of that are education, so superintendent's office, board or trustees, governance, that side of things, and then the business office and HR. And so again, a couple of comments in terms of third-party work for the business administration is just basically showing that we spent more than budget in that area. Operations and maintenance is the one that's, I think, feeling the most pinch from some of the supply escalations. And so that's one of the areas that I'd like to focus on for the amended budget, making sure that we get it right so that we can support the work that Phil and his team do. And again, it's all understood. Again, the 422,000 is a lot because we've talked about the additional costs that our closed sites are costing us. These are borne by that department. So when we talk about the work that the additional work that maintenance has to do on Craig Street Commons or Qualicum Commons or French Creek, this is the department that bears those costs. Likewise, when it comes to false pay work, same thing. The teacherage, we talked about the teacherage being a cost for the district. It basically shows up here nowhere else. And so this is what we're kind of making sure that we've got the right budget in there to support the work they're doing, as well as get at it from the other side, which is if these sites are costing us, what are we doing about it? And so those bigger picture questions needing to be answered and resolved. Finally, the transportation and housing, obviously underspent, which is a good thing because again of the recoveries and replacements that we've got enough money in there. The recoveries is field trip recoveries, just so you know. The replacements is we clearly didn't have enough bus drivers over the course of the last year. We occasionally had to cancel routes. So some of that savings, right, wrong, or indifferent, is showing up in there. But again, at the end of the day, we finished where we hoped we would. And in fact, we finished a little bit better with that $260,000 surplus being added back. The
Right.
last section, yeah, so the last section on
Sorry.
this report, no, it's okay. The last section on this report is the special purpose funds. Again, we talked about uh, the nature of them, which is for a specific purpose. We don't control necessarily, we control some of the granting, obviously. So if the if the province announces some funding and we raise our hands and and we receive these fundings, we have to spend them in a certain way. So again, what you're seeing in here is that sometimes they come a little bit delayed in the year, and so we don't spend them all in the 1 year, and so we have every ability to carry those funds forward. And so that's what you're seeing in the terms of the Family Affordability Fund. That was the money that was released in October of last year, 450,000. I'm rounding, $450,000 of which went to field trips, food programs, and fees, student fees. And so 89 is being rolled over in that area. And then the early care and learning scan that Sheila's been working with Jillian on, but 175, we spent about 86,569, and we'll carry over the remainder. And just as a notation, with the new money coming to us in the form of the food, get the right name here, Feeding Futures Fund,
Feeding futures.
which is the 520. What we've said on the Family Affordability Fund is obviously of those three categories, the food doesn't need to be addressed because we've got additional funding in this other special purpose. So we're asking the schools to carry forward these funds and address the field trips and support the field trips. So that's how those carry forward funds are going to be spent. The ECEL is just continuation of the program that Sheila is doing with Jill in the district and recognizing the early care and learning supports that are in our district already. So that's the nature of it. I'll leave it there if there's any questions.
Thank you. And I personally, I really like that you're pessimistic in your budgeting. I always think that's a good thing, even though I'm kind of the other way. And it's a pleasure to work with
I prefer the word
Mr. Amos.
I prefer the word cautious or
Yes.
conservative.
Cautious, and because you did say pessimistic though. So
Yeah,
I
good.
know.
there you go. Trustee Flynn.
Just a facetious comment off the top. When is the ministry ever going to lose function 1, function 4, 5? It shows that we can't even count. I think in succession, these are obsolete terms that are just beyond the pale for me. Anyway, just if you could though, Ron, help me out in under the district admin, business administration piece, overage, and you said third party work. A bit of more understanding of what that was.
I'm coaching my words. It's the investigation.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, Eve, your hand, there we go. Okay, great.
No, it
So
goes
we can
down
move on.
automatically.
Yeah, it's eventually.
You have to wait for it to go down.
Yeah, so the next item is the financial statement discussion and analysis. And I just want to introduce this by saying this is a fabulous document. I think that for many people who don't understand the accounting process and the budgeting process and how everything, depreciation and all of that kind of stuff works together, putting it in words like this that are so clear and so understandable is just a fabulous document. And of course, as we get to the financial statements, trustees and others, we want to read our financial statements with this document as well. And I just want to thank the writers. I don't know who was involved in doing the writing, but the clarity is great. So over to you then, Mr. Amos.
Thank you. Yes, so absolutely. This was part of the ministry's initiative to make better transparency or more transparency in the financial statements. I think most people recognize that you shouldn't need a CPA degree / designation to read these things. And so this is truly meant to bring the statements to the people. I know that sounds kind of weird, but at least to put it in a context that people can understand and have some understanding to it. And so absolutely, this I think is the 5th year of it. It has been mandated for 5 years. When I talk about the next one that Ryan and I will speak to is the multi-year financial plan. It isn't, I won't say mandatory. Yeah, it's not compulsory yet. The multi-year financial plan, we're working on it in the background, and I think Ryan can bring some context to what's going into it, but it isn't mandatory yet, and so we are going to do it. Whereas the FSD and A has been mandated for the past couple of years, and so it goes to the ministry alongside of our financial statements so that they can confirm that we are doing it. We have a mandate, obviously, to take it to the board, take it to the stakeholders, and then put it on our website alongside of the financial statements. And it really is about a deeper understanding of what is behind the financial statements with the narrative approach. That being said, so context of understanding the school district performance, and again, it's just really providing some high level understanding of what these areas mean. What is the operating fund? What is a special purpose fund? What is a capital fund? And then speaking in terms of monies in and monies out that people can kind of understand. I'm not going to read it to you necessarily, but I'm going to just sort of highlight some of the graphics that are involved in it. And so the accumulated operating surface, I spoke to this one in terms of the $260,000 that this year's operating fund had as a surplus goes into an amalgamated surplus or an accumulated surplus, and that's what's being expressed under Exhibit 1. And so last year, so 2 years ago, as I spoke about, we went from a $2.5 million operating surplus, accumulated surplus, and by using that 1.1 that I showed you on that previous sheet, we dropped it down to 1.37. And then with this year's 260,000 contribution, we brought it up to about 1.63. And so the ministry recognizes that surpluses are necessary, surpluses are needed, but what they want is transparency in terms of how you're showing them and how much is appropriate to keep for contingency. And so they've asked boards to develop policy, which which the board worked on last year, well, this year, but last fiscal year, to develop a better understanding of what goes into the operating reserves and what is the plan for how you use it and how you develop a multi-year spending plan. And so that's all being addressed now with some of this MYFP that they're calling it, the MyFP. But again, it is recognizing that surpluses are okay. Just tell us how you're using it and don't keep too much back. It's really what the ministry wants. Don't be a district that has I don't know, 30% of their budget sitting in there as a surplus kind of thing. So our language is between 2 and 3%. And so that's where we're at in terms of when we present our statements of what we're trying to get to when we show the contingencies or reserve for future years and ones that are being allocated for specific reasons. The other thing of note, obviously, on here is going into this year, we kind of the projected. So you got the FTE enrollment that made up our projections for this year. And again, that's why you're seeing a full year complement of 4373 for 22-23. So we declined slightly last year, as we know. And so that's what's being reflected in that Exhibit 2. Again, other things to point out in terms of our capital investment, and again, you've heard a lot of these comments through Phil, our Director of Operations, in terms of the capital programs, the minor and the major capital works that we submit. And so really this is just talking about some of those big ticket items that are being funded through the ministry and just sort of presenting them as this is how much we spent on the Bolinas roof replacement this year was 609,000. Bolinas ventilation systems, 562,000. 3 solar projects worth 370 because we spent it over 2 years, which is why we got a total of 657 but this year's spend that's hitting the books this year is 371 rounded. And then the last installment of the Arrowview Child Care Center that went through the books in 22-23. Again, I make comment about significant events. So again, COVID is still percolating through the system, through the provincial systems, through the global supply chains. Likewise, the Ukraine invasion is having its impact. ISP is just one of these things that we kind of point out, that we kind of recognize that the ebbs and flows of the economy and the global events can also change our international program. And so we just sort of put some commentary in there that there is an underlying risk, but we're aware of it and we're managing it. Same with school capacities. We talk about the class sizes, the capacities of our schools, where the growth is. We monitor it with time, but it is important that we at least point out that there is a risk, and then this is what we're doing about it, and this is how we mitigate it. Again, further analysis from the financial side, we're showing you funding revenues and variances with explanations. You can see that. Here I'm on page 7 of 9 is the accumulated surplus I talked about earlier. In terms of actually how is that 1.6 being supplement? How is it being divided up, as it were? And so school budgets, you're seeing about 40,000 still sitting for school budgets. You're seeing $125,000 for software. This is the routing software that we're putting aside in there. And then a total of 1.2 set aside for appropriated for future years operating budgets. And again, that coincides with that 2 to 3% for future years. And again, and that's that chart, or that table, I guess, actually is part and embedded in the financial statements that the board will see, and they will do actual a motion for that to recommend that this is the division, if you want, of the operating surplus. Not much. Oh, last thing I guess I want to point out is I've been a little bit more transparent, I'm using the term, but more obvious in terms of the Bolinas track, how those funds are distributed into a couple of accounts. And so that's what you're seeing on page 8 and 9 of 9. Basically, I'm saying that we've got $313,000 in our local capital, of which 137,000 is remaining of the commitment for the Bolinas track from the board, 50 for the mower, 126 uncommitted, and then add to that about a $695,000 contribution from the 3 municipalities that we share borders with. As well as public contributions of 101 that makes up the 695 that is sitting in other capital reserves. With a and then a note on there that talks about the $750,000 contribution that's coming from the combined contributions of RDN, Town of Qualicum, and Parksville that is yet to be seen, but has been committed to.
Good.
I think that's my wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Amos. And I have MATA President Matt Woods.
Hey, thanks, Ron, Mr. Amos, for getting that report. I just had a question regarding your Exhibit 2, funded FTE enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, when I look at the numbers, they don't match the previous year's Exhibit 2 that's been in previous documents.
I've corrected it for full year enrollment. So
for instance, in 2021, you have 4,409, but in past years it's 4,228. So
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. So I used to report just the September enrollment. Okay, so we do 3 counts, as you know. We do a September count, we do a February count, we do a March count. But because of the implications of the DL programming on our overall enrollment, I've changed how I report in here to a year, what we call a full year reporting, so that it coincides with the reporting that the ministry has in their operating grants. And so I've added the second and third counts to the aggregated FTE.
Okay.
Okay. So what you're seeing is the full year count, which is September plus February's DL plus May's DL.
And that's less than what we had in previous years.
Correct.
Okay, does it make sense, Matt?
Sort of.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, hang on to this as we read it with the financial statements that will be coming out soon. Multi-year financial plan, Ron and Ryan.
So I'll quickly, yeah. So my task was the FSDA. Ryan's task was the multi-year financial plan kind of thing, because there's a little bit because it was a little bit more of a softer introduction. We did the policy work, as you recall, with the board. We did the policy work to include this this language, if you want, this reporting element into the planning of the board, and the policy got done. We did the policy. It was inconclusive if they were going to be mandatory this year, and so we did our summer. Ryan spent his summer working on language, reviewing other districts that are sort of ahead of the game, looking at theirs, looking at the ministry's. They sent out kind of a table of, it should include this, it could include this, and you might want to include this kind of thing. So good, better, best kind of deal. And so he sort of built the narrative around what we needed, and then we're sort of adding content of additional, like prettying it up a little bit so that it actually looks good too, that it's actually a publishable document in the end. So because we wanted to give ourselves a little bit of time, now that we've got new colors and new, as we can see, we've got a new, not an icon, but logo, thank you. Because we got new logo and colors kind of thing, we wanted to make it, we wanted to refresh it with some legitimate, if you want, some themes that you're seeing on some of our other district documents. So I don't know if you want to speak to the work that you've done so far, Ryan, but again, recognizing that we've got a little bit of time to try this out. We will submit it to the ministry, but again, at least we're not feeling as though we had to submit it with our financial documents at the end of September. So we've got a little bit of space of time as we continue to build it. Ryan?
Yes. Well, thank you, Ron, for handing this project over to me for the summer.
My pleasure.
But yeah, anyway, so when I dove into this, there was some guidance that I took from some other districts that like Ron said were ahead of the game. But the interesting aspect was that the ministry didn't provide really strong guidelines on any of this when it first began. So you have a wide range of reports from various districts. Some of the multi-year financial plans were 14, 15 pages long, whereas others were over 100 pages long.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very wide variety of information that was provided in these reports. Fortunately, the ministry did come out with a checklist, and it looks like this. It's got color coordinated and all that. So the areas that I kind of focused in on were the green and the blues, which were, by their wording, strongest recommendation and strong recommendation. Then there was the red boxes that were recommended, but not as strong as green or blue. So that's kind of what I worked off of. So what I've basically got so far is outlining a purpose for this report. It's basically, again, adding greater transparency to our work and setting financial direction for the development of annual budgets moving forward. This plan is a projection 3 years into the future. So as Ron alluded to, it's not a requirement for this year. We suspect that it may be for next year moving forward. So for this year, my draft is showing 2023, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26 as projection. Next year, we'll roll that into the 3 years further. So in the report as well, I've got a district overview, just talking about our schools, the territories that we are located on, and just some background about our community and whatnot. I also get into the Board of Education. So when we pretty up the document, I do foresee having the pictures of the beautiful trustees on there. A little bit of detail on what the board has established as guiding principles, and the roles and responsibilities of the trustees. So a little bit there. Then one of the major pieces to this report that's a little bit different than the FSDA is that it talks a bit more about the alignment of the financial processes and procedures with the strategic plan and the strategic priorities. So that's one of the key pieces of this report. Then we get into budget development overview. So basically a timeline of the budget cycle throughout the 12 months, what we do in each quarter for that. And then we get into some background on the grant funding, the different types of funds, including the operating, the special purpose, and the capital fund. So it ties in a little bit closely with the FSDA on that side. And then we get into the actual multi-year planning piece. And the multi-year planning piece, we obviously have to give an outline of some of the assumptions that we have to make for the 3-year projection. What we expect could happen with enrollment, how enrollment would drive our staffing, what that enrollment does to our overall operating revenue, the increased staffing costs, collective bargaining increases on rates, and then even talking about stuff such as inflation and the inflationary environment, its impact on our supplies and services as well. And then we take that overall and we look at what happens to whether or not we'll see a surplus or deficit moving into the future. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what this report will inevitably have in it. At this stage, like I said, it's kind of just fleshing out the details, and then we'll pretty it up, and then hopefully we'll have some sort of nice looking draft for you to look at in the near future.
Okay, thank you. So we'll track it through finance and operations most likely, but stay tuned. This is exciting news. Multi-year planning. It's fabulous. I don't know, Trustee Austin, did you want to practice your decarbonization report, or would you prefer to leave that for the regular board meeting?
I think we can just do it once at the regular board meeting.
Okay, thank you. We will move on then to the minor capital submission for 2024-25. And there is an item, this is an item for recommendation.
And I'll start, if you don't mind, Phil. I'll start and introduce it because there's, again, getting folks in terms of the scheduling of events. So the major capital, if you recall, we always do I'll go back one more month. The AFG spending plan goes to the ministry at the end of May, I think still. And that followed closely behind by the end of June, the major capital works goes to the ministry for the next fiscal year. And that's the one where the false base showed up on, and now the Bolinas one is showing up as Phil indicated. So that goes in pre-summer, so that the ministry has time to review those things over the course of over the summer. And then the minor capital, which is basically anything under, I don't think they've got a set amount, but maybe under $2 million projects kind of thing, are considered minor, and that's the Sept. That's the, sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms, but School Enhancement Program, the Carbon Neutral Capital Program, the playground, the food infrastructure, the bus replacement, and then on the major capital are the replacements, the additions, the land acquisitions, that sort of thing. So this one that we're putting to the putting to the board for next week's board meeting is the minor capital. And I'll just quickly throw out another one because I might not get another chance to speak. But the other thing that's going to the board that doesn't need to come through here is the FIP money. And again, that's what I've showed you here on the bottom of this spreadsheet, is that FIP Food Infrastructure Program. And we'll submit a new one, but we submitted one early in June for the 23-24 year, and it is coming to the board for approval. So we did get the money for that. And that's the one in the gray column of the 23-24, $46,000 for Winchelsea and 56.8 for other kitchen enhancements in all schools. So that is coming before the board in a yet another amendment to the original 23-24 minor capital. It's become a monthly thing, unfortunately, because we did it in March, and then when we reallocated funds for the Bolinas roof, it showed up before the board in August, and it'll show up before the board in September. So now we're talking about the 24-25 minor capitals, and now I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thanks, Ron. So as I mentioned, excuse me, the intent at this time next year is actually to have a 4 or 5 year outlook here based on the strategic energy management plan. But we are a year-to-year proposition at the moment, and it's bleedingly obvious to us where some of the work should focus. And so with regards to the minor capital, this year we got to the gym floor at Qualicum, and we did a Bowser gym roof. And what we're looking to do for minor capital next year is get the Winchelsea, a portion of Winchelsea roof, which is one of our worst roofs, done. This is part of me having the ministry here tomorrow, is to actually try and work out how far I can push and getting the envelope without getting our hands slapped. And so I think last year we got to 1.1 million. So this year I'm sort of pushing to 1.2, 1.3 with 3 projects. And that is the Winchelsea roof. It's the change room upgrade at the Bolinas Gymnasium, and that would be with some major infrastructure upgrades there in the 2 change rooms there in the gymnasium, and then also the fire protection system at Oceanside. So they're the 3 projects we got in the hopper, and I will touch on the conversation tomorrow when I have them here in the community. As far as the carbon neutral, I feel like I had pushed the envelope as far as I could. I know that I'm going to get potentially around $200,000 for electrical upgrades and $200,000 for HVAC upgrades. We've got a lot of work done this year with those 2 funding programs, and so we're going after the same thing again, and we're going to go through the district and do electrical upgrades, upgrading the switch gears and the main electrical supply into the schools. So for electrical, we have Winchelsea and Bowser, and then for energy efficiency for the HVAC, it's upgrading. The last 2 schools that we have to upgrade the DDCs on is Oceanside and Errington. So we've made good inroads this year. 80% of our schools are up, 80-90% of the schools are up on modern technology for the DDC. Hopefully we see some energy cost reductions over the next 12 months with some of the work we've already done. There's nothing in here for the buses at this stage. The buses, as I mentioned, we're getting some good data at the moment on what our capacity constraints are. And this is what I'm going to approach with the ministry when they're here tomorrow. The e-bus that we have has only run one day out of this new school year, and it continues to be down, and we don't have the ability to get it up on the road at the moment, and it's causing an issue for any redundancy we have on large buses, because now we have no redundancy. The one spare large bus we have is consistently in service. So I'm not sure if it's if it's the e-buses province wide, because I know there is a bit of a challenge with some of them in they're pretty early in their maturity, or whether we got something that's causing more problems than other districts. But that's something we're trying to work through at the moment. And so nothing's on here at the moment, because I really want to sort of lean on the ministry tomorrow to say what qualifies for bus replacements and that sort of thing. So that is the only one that's sort of up in the air. Ron mentioned the FIP, the Food Infrastructure Program. We already got some funding, and because it's a new program, it was done in March. Winchelsea, 46,000. The various is really Bolinas and Qualicum that we've already got funding for. We're looking to finish up the Bolinas kitchen and then also put in a food program kitchen there at KSS. What we're asking for this year is for 100,000 to go and get dishwashers and some warming ovens and all that for all the elementary schools. And so that's the difference from what we've already been funded to what we're asking. And I've been very vocal on the playgrounds about Springwood not having enough there for the amount of kids that they have. And so they're next on the docket to get a playground, to get an additional playground there next year. And that reflects that. That's it. I'll pause there and take any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah. Has anybody got anything, any questions? I'm not seeing, oh, Eve, is that
Sorry.
your hand?
Just a little elaboration, if you could, on the e-bus functioning
Yeah.
only once so far. I mean, I know in the middle of sort of mid-year last year, it took 6 weeks to get a part or something that went, and I mean, do we have a lemon of an e-bus? You sort of alluded to that, but is this a supply chain? I hate to use that word. Supply chain issue that we just can't get this stuff, or are we early adopters and we shouldn't have been as early?
I think it's the latter. Yeah, I think it's the early adoption thing. It's not holding charge, so we can't get it to charge at the moment.
Wow.
That's what's happening right now. But as the school year started, the supplier had to upgrade some sort of electrical circuit board or something on there. I'm butchering the terminology. They upgraded it, and then it didn't actually operationalize. So it was supposed to be operational for the start of the school year. So then they have to come back. So they had to come back to site to fix the part replacement that was a recall. And then it's just been one thing after the other. I spoke to Ron about it a little bit the other day, just saying the supply chain is an issue because we have one supplier that we can buy parts from, and we're getting fleeced on that. Secondly, when we encounter problems, the main provider to fix it is in Victoria, and we can't drive it to Victoria because it can't get enough charge to get to Victoria. So we pay to tow it to Victoria to get it fixed, and then tow it back up because there's nowhere to charge it to get it down there. Districts in Ladysmith and a little bit closer to Victoria are able to drive it. So that's just the ongoing challenges that we've had.
Oh my goodness.
So Souk, who have a number of these buses, Nanaimo has a number. Okay, if we're outside the limit and have to tow, that's one issue. But are you touching base with those districts to see if they're getting little chronic nigglies as well?
Yeah, we have been. Yeah. I think they have a different brand bus than what we have. I honestly think it's part of the bus that we got. But there is an equal frustration across the province in all school districts with this technology and being early adopters. There is definitely, even when I chatted to the ministry in the summer about it, they're hearing it, and we're seeing lots of requests for information about how a school district's handling it. Everyone's got a shared frustration at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the e-bus again. So, but quickly over to Trustee Kellogg, then Trustee Austin.
So I just had.
Oh, we've lost.
Sorry, I just shut my mic off. I just had a quick question about the document. So all the projects are numbered, but some have X's. Are those there because they're either in progress or they've been completed?
So we're looking down at
Yes.
the bottom there in Belina. Yes, thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks,
Someone,
Phil.
yeah.
Great. Trustee Austin.
I just wanted to say things like the e-bus. The only way things are going to change is when you take the initiative, become the early adopters, deal with the problems, have other people have the problems, create the stink, create the conversation, and lobby the government and advocacy. Things aren't going to change if we don't make, at least make the effort to try. So, I think it's very important. Yes, we're having these problems, but I think those problems are actually opportunities because they're getting out there. They, and hopefully the changes and the funding and the money and the infrastructure will fall in line. But if people don't actually do it, we're not going to get those changes that are needed. So despite the fact that it may not be working very well, it's still a really important piece, I think, in terms of moving forward on carbon neutrality.
I don't disagree with you, and the challenge that I see, and I wasn't here during the funding protection declining enrollment stage, but from what I can observe with the busing department is we really tried to do more with less, and we've got kids really stacked on the buses. And the one bus that we have that is the backup bus is now in use with its unreliability of the e-bus, and that could potentially impact field trips. And if we had some additional buses in the system to cover the outages, it would be a little bit it would be easier to absorb. That's the only thing I see for us.
Yeah, I think this is not going to be the end of this discussion. And to Trustee Austin's point, I'm an early adopter kind of person. So yeah, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Back to you, Trustee Austin.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know, Phil, you'll be, you have tons on your list, I'm sure, when the ministry folk come tomorrow. But if you find there's a lull in conversation and you want to put a bug in their ear around the e-buses and how, school districts are trying their best to follow some of the guidance of the province, well, then they have to step up to help us here as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It is one of my. It's on the list to talk to them about for sure.
Anything more before we move to that recommendation? Nope. And Mr. Amos, are there any other recommendations that we need to make? Because I will take them as a group if there are.
There are not.
Okay.
Yep, we're good to go. We're good to go with just the minor capital.
Thank you. And Trustee Austin, your hand is still up. Are you okay? There we go. Okay, thank you. So trustees, for recommendation to the regular board meeting, the 2024-2025 minor capital submission, are we all in favor? Please raise your hand.
Yep.
Okay, I'm seeing hands. I'm seeing Barry. Okay, we're good. Thank you very much. And just to give you a bit of an update, you'll notice future topics. I'm excited about this long-range facility plan. And then on our list of things, first quarter financial summary, enrollment report, of course, will come in October. And my belief, Mr. Amos, is that the last year's audited financial statements will come directly to the board.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And don't forget, bring your copy of the financial statement discussion and analysis for that. Anything further before we move on? Okay. Our next meeting is October 17th at 10:30. And I thank everybody for all of their work and all of our good writers and so on and so forth. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I don't think do we have a motion to adjourn?
I
Not
do,
enough.
it's
Oh.
on the list, so,
I know.
and I
but I'm
saw
not-
Julie's hand, so we're out of here and back at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you.